Welcome. This is Simply the Truth live with me, Doug Harris. Thank you for joining us because you are as important as those of us here in the studio. And in the studio with me today is JT.
Hiya, Doug.
Hi, JT.
Good to be
here again. As I always say, love him or hate him. You know, our viewers are totally divided over you, JT.
I want them to love me. Love me.
Oh, I think you've got a good lot of people that love you.
That's okay then.
It's always a great program, all joking apart, because even if we don't agree with you, you bring things in a light that we can look at. We can say, okay, well, if we don't believe that, what is true? And so that's it's great to have you with us again.
Yeah, and I enjoy coming. It's always good.
Good. Now, we're in the middle of this series on apologetics in Acts. That's where we are. What I thought we'd do in this program is we'd sort of come out a little bit. We've been looking at Acts 17 and got quite a bit involved in that. So if we can come out a little bit and just sort of give an overview in this program of maybe some of the good and some of the bad things that are there. So, I mean, really, what is the purpose and maybe the benefits of apologetics?
Well, perhaps I might just say again, just in case there's somebody's missed the first program, that apologetics isn't apologizing. It's all to do with giving an answer. It's all to do with responding to questions, just giving a defense of the faith. One of the biggest mistakes people make when they come to thinking about apologetics, it's a bit like what people do sometimes with spiritual warfare. They will say, for instance, there's evangelism, there's social action, there's prayer, then there's spiritual warfare. But biblically, I don't believe that's correct. Spiritual warfare is what those things are. Likewise, apologetics shouldn't be seen as, there's evangelism, Bible teaching, and then there's apologetics, because you won't find much information on the role of an evangelist in the New Testament, and you won't find any information which talks about the apologist. Doing apologetics should be an outgrowth of evangelism and Bible teaching, just as we've seen when we did the gospel series a while ago. Because the gospel focuses on the resurrection of Jesus from the dead, well, that is naturally apologetic, because you are providing evidence which is the good news in that sense. So when it comes to using apologetics, evidences and things like that for what we believe and what we're saying, I suppose the first point, which is sort of obvious in some ways, is that it can provide intellectual security.
JT, talking to me about being intellectual. Come on, you know I'm a simpleton. And all joking apart, though, although we're talking about intellectual security, we don't actually have to be that heady, as it were, with regard to this, do we?
No, and I don't mean academic security. Intellect is to do with your mind and your thinking. And where there are ongoing serious doubts, that can impair a person's commitment as a Christian. It can cause alarm, depression, fear. Let me give you an example. As most of the viewers will know if they've seen me before, I lead quite an extensive youth work in Swansea called Tribe. And obviously young people are grappling with all sorts of questions, but they're also very vulnerable. And one lad came up to me, he was 16, I think, perhaps, 16. And he said he'd been talking to his brother-in-law. And his brother-in-law, who was well into his 20s, talked about how the Bible's been made up, the wrong books are in the Bible, Da Vinci Code was thrown in, and the lad was very alarmed. He was very concerned. In fact, he actually dropped out of coming along for quite a period of time. So I made contact with him. Two things happened. First of all, I talked to him. We sat down and I worked through just a few of those issues. And you could say he was comforted, all right? He was more secure. What was amazing, though, is that God maneuvered the situation that I ended up talking to his brother-in-law. and his sister. And sitting in the room, I did my Isaiah 53 thing, where I read out Isaiah 53, which is a prophecy about Jesus, and I said, who does this refer to? And this chap, who was a skeptic, said to me, oh, it's obvious it's Jesus, obviously. And I said, you are absolutely right. And when I told him it was written 750 years before Jesus was born, he almost fell off his chair in his living room. So there was a double whammy, that not only was the lad Chris, made more secure in his faith, but taking it a step further, actually dealing with a skeptic concerned, not humiliating him, not having an argument with him, but just presenting some of the Christian facts, which is what apologetics is all about, really gained some ground.
What is interesting in talking about intellectual security is you've actually talked about two different sorts of people. Now, often people just think of apologetics so that I can communicate the gospel with a non-Christian. Mm-hmm. But what you've actually said there is, here is a young Christian, or can even be an older Christian, that has still got doubts, that it gives you a security because you actually see that things that are said are real and true and can be, to whatever level, proven.
Absolutely. There was another chap I was talking to recently who's been a Christian for 25 years, and he'd started reading some of the material by the Four Horsemen of Atheism, because there's been a rise in aggressive militant atheism in the last 10 years. He'd read some of Dawkins' materials, and we had, as is so often the case with me, we had some food together, and we talked about some of the arguments used by these people. So it really does. We as Christians need to know that our faith is based in fact. That is, there are reasonable grounds to believe what we believe, because if our faith is based on an emotional experience we had when we were 12, or just the good feeling we had being part of the church or being part of the youth group, it's not going to last. It's not going to last beyond the next problem. So, let me just read a verse.
Please.
It's one of my favourite verses in the Bible, though I say that all the time whenever I read a bit of the Bible. But at the moment, for this programme, this is one of my favourite verses, okay? And I suspect it might be one of yours as well.
Yeah, it is. I know what you're going to read. Yeah. It is.
It's Dr. Luke. Luke was a doctor. This is what he says. He's writing to a chap called Theophilus. He says, now, many have undertaken to compile an account of the things that have been fulfilled among us, like the accounts passed on to us by those who were eyewitnesses and servants of the word from the beginning. So it seemed good to me as well, because I followed all things carefully from the beginning, to write an orderly account for you, most excellent Theophilus. Now, this is a document, perhaps I shouldn't have said it was Luke at the beginning.
Yes.
This is a document from the 1st century, where this chap, who was an academic, pulling together different accounts to make sure, and he says he'd followed all the situations carefully, pulled together the documents, created an orderly account, which we now know as the Gospel of Luke. And Luke's purpose was that this chap Theophilus would know exactly what has happened. Yeah. He talked about eyewitnesses. He's drawing in the evidence for the things that are being said, and we need that at the base of our faith.
Because what I find interesting about that is it says he's investigated everything and investigated everything carefully. That what you actually have in Luke is you have some incidents that don't appear in any other gospel. But what he's made sure is that what he's put in that gospel is true. And I think this does demand, doesn't it, that when we start using apologetics, when we start saying, yes, we want to use these things, we are sure that what we're using is true, isn't it?
That's right. Yeah,
You're
absolutely.
smiling.
I'm smiling because, you see, when I use some of the sort of negative illustrations, I smile because I'm the one that used them.
Yeah.
I'm the one that's committed all the mistakes. So I'm not picking on anybody here. Like you said, the importance of making sure the facts and evidence that we use is right. Obviously, there's a few things. As we said last time, we don't want to be talking about dinosaurs when we really want to get to Jesus. Right? We don't want to be talking about periphery matters. But yeah, when I was younger, there's an anecdote coming here now, Doug.
I'm listening.
All right.
I'm listening.
When I was younger, I had a little booklet printed by, am I allowed to say this, Moody Press from America.
Yeah.
And it was all about the missing day. Now, in Joshua chapter 10, there's a story which some viewers may be familiar with about the sun standing still. And effectively, there was supposedly a missing day. And this little booklet says, well, astronomers have said, and they've worked out, they've calculated a missing day.
They put it all into the computer, didn't
How
they?
on earth? Aye, and can you imagine the memory of computers back in the 70s or 60s when this was done? Dear, dear. Well, anyway, and this was a very common evidence for the Christian faith. Now, why anybody would want to use an obscure sort of evidence like that to show the Christian faith is true, I have no idea, because it's been totally debunked. You know, it was never true in the first place. It was never even half true in the first place. NASA had never done the calculation. They couldn't have done the calculation, and it's not calculable anyway. So it was somebody writing if possibly could be's, but anyway, so it's not good. We've got to be careful what we're using.
It is, because every now and again, one of these absolute mind-boggling illustrations comes out.
Yeah.
And I think it's in those days, it was just with the printed word.
Yeah.
Today, it's the email.
Well,
and so it's written
right.
one day, it's in 3 million people's email boxes the next.
Do you remember we did a programme a few years ago, Fads, Myths and Legends?
Yes, I do, yeah.
It was an interesting programme. It was when we were doing phone-ins and anyway.
Yeah.
But yeah, and there was the Phantom Hitchhiker was circulating. But there was a secular version. Then the Christian version was the hitchhiker would say to somebody, the second coming is soon. They'd look in the mirror, the driver would look in the mirror, and the hitchhiker had gone.
Yes.
And it was just one of those, and I was hearing preachers using that as an evidence of the Christian faith and the soon coming return of Jesus and whatever. We just must not do that.
Because, I mean, the problem with this, I mean, we can laugh at it, but there is a very serious point to this, isn't it? Because if we do use that, and we're saying this is evidence of our Christianity, the Christianity I'm talking to you about today, and that person actually goes away and investigates it and finds out it's not true, they're actually going to say, well, the Bible's not true.
Well,
so we do have to be very, very careful, don't we?
We really have to be careful. And you know, I remember some years ago, and the thing is, I don't know who this person is, okay? I can't remember who they were. But someone asked me for proof of, and at that time, I'm going to have to say it, at that time I was a young earth creationist, and they would ask me for evidence. And
Here come the emails.
Yeah, I know, I'm sorry, I'm sorry. So at that time I was, and what happened was that they asked me for evidence, and I provided a link, it was the early days of the internet then, to the Paluxy riverbed, Glen Rose, California, where there's dinosaur footprints, and trotting alongside, crossing them, is human footprints. Right. The idea being that humans and dinosaurs were at the same time. Now, it wasn't long after that it was totally debunked. And it was, you know, perhaps in all good faith people thought it was, but it really wasn't the proof. And what I was doing, not only was I focusing on something unnecessary, which was this idea of the age of the earth, as if that is the crucial thing about Christianity, but also I was using an evidence, firstly outside of the Bible, and secondly, susceptible to easily debunking. The same would be said of the Turin Shroud. So we've got to be so careful what we do. And the more centred we are, the more focused we are on the key issues, the less we will fall for, you know, there's another one we were talking about over lunch, actually, and it was in Christianity magazine, it was in loads of other magazines across the world some years back. The Russians drilled a hole in Siberia, and they dropped it. Why would you drop a microphone down the biggest hole that you've ever drilled? Why would you do that? Anyway, the report was that there were sounds of screaming and people in torment.
Because the microphone went into hell, didn't it?
Yeah, that's right. It was supposed to have gone into hell.
Yes.
Come on. You know, I remember that being in the paper. I thought to myself, please.
You're a wonderful skeptic.
Yeah.
But this is the point. I mean, this is the negative side of it, and I don't want to dwell on the negative side too long, but the points that you're making quite clearly is we do have to be intellectually secure over the things that we're using.
Yes.
We need to have checked them out. So if that person we're talking to is going to challenge us, we have the evidence. We have clearly investigated everything and investigated everything carefully. And I mean, and on the other side, of course, that there are so many good illustrations, and so much that we can use in apologetics that we don't have to use these dodgy ones, let's call them that, for a better reason.
Well, and we've touched on one today, and I know I haven't repeated the whole story, but the use of Isaiah 53 is very, very helpful in lots of situations. And if done I've seen it done badly, but if done properly, not only has it got great shock value, because people will come up to us and expect us to prove. But this one, you engage them where you get them to read a part of Isaiah 53. And not only does it have a good impact, but it also begs the next question, which still keeps it very close into the centre, which is, how do you know it was written 750 years before Jesus was born?
Yes.
And it's so easy then to step on and say, well, we have actually the Dead Sea Scrolls which date before the time of Jesus to show that this whatever. And that's it. You know, where do they go from there? They have to think, wow, you know. But yes, there are plenty. Besides predictive stuff, it's just the whole basis of the Bible is rooted in real time, real history, real people, real places.
And I mean, we've talked about intellectual security, and we've talked about dealing both for the Christian so that they know their faith is based on something worthwhile, but also for the skeptic, isn't it, as well? In other words, there are a lot of skeptics. Now, some skeptics just don't want answers. They're skeptics, and you know. But there are some that what I call genuine skeptics. They've genuinely got questions, and they're willing to sit down and talk. Now, apologetics, you can begin to work through with such ones, can't you?
Yeah, you can.
With that skepticism.
You can. And the easiest way, one of the easiest ways to tell the difference between someone who's just a skeptic, and someone who's genuinely asking questions is that the not real skeptic, the one who just doesn't want to believe anyway, will flit from one thing to another. So someone will say, oh, well, you can't believe the Bible anyway, it's all full of mistakes. And then you'll say to them, so which mistakes are you thinking of particularly? There's my Bible, could you please show me one? And of course they've never read it.
Yes.
All right? But who made God anyway? Yeah. And you say, well, actually God's revealed himself, and it says in Psalm 90 verse 2, because this is God's self-revelation, you don't have to believe it, but I'm okay with it. It says, he has always existed, from everlasting to everlasting God is. So there wasn't a beginning to God. But there's the wrong books in the Bible anyway. You know, they're just mucking about.
Yes.
They're not serious.
Can I just ask you at that point, there comes a point where it really, almost that phrase, casting your pearl before swine, that's where that phrase is used. From such people, it's almost not worth dealing with.
No, indeed.
In the end.
And sometimes it's good to cut to the chase, and not to get all hellfire, because we did look a bit about that last time as well, but to simply say, well, look, this is the bottom line. I believe, and I believe there's perfectly reasonable grounds to believe this, that God has stepped into this world in the person of Jesus. If you are asking genuinely what God is like, you have Jesus. You can read one of the Gospels to find out, if he was one of us, what would he be like? It's just like that. There is ample evidence for those who search for the fact that Jesus came back from the dead. The main point for you to remember, my friend, is that God has set a day when he will judge the world by the man that he has chosen, and he has given proof of this to all mankind by raising him from the dead. That was Acts 17, Doug.
Yes.
As I know you know.
Absolutely.
So you can almost like say, look, your choice.
Yes.
You know, you're going to stand before God as well as I am.
But so that's just for the skeptic.
Yeah.
But for the genuine skeptic, there is a place for taking these things through. And if they are responsive to you, if they are willing to go, there is a place of really going through some of these very clear apologetic things. And I think in future programs on this, we'll really start underlining some of those things that we can use. But there's a real place for spending time with such people, isn't there?
There most certainly is. We mustn't make the mistake of thinking that providing proof and evidence is what it's all about, because ultimately it's the Holy Spirit who needs to convict them, convince them that they've sinned and they need to repent and believe, etc. But working through the, if you like, the sound footing which the faith is based on will help them not to get tripped up by the sort of things that stray into the eye line, if you like a lot of things. If you look at the Discovery Channel, you get some rubbish. You really do. And working through, like, I'll be quite honest, I think Alpha Course, the early lessons of the Alpha Course are very good, because they do deal with who is Jesus, how do you know the Bible's true and reliable. So I would really encourage anybody to read, and the book's not a difficult book to read, Questions of Life it's called.
And I mean, you've mentioned the Alpha Course, there are of course other books and other things, and certainly anybody that makes contact with us, we will happily give you some of those resources of where you can go and find some reliable evidence. We're not saying to you, you've got to believe this, but we're saying, there's the evidence, check it out for yourself. And I think that's what we would say. Anybody that's watching this programme that have got doubts, and I know some Christians come to me and they don't want the doubts, but maybe because, somebody's gone along and spoken and the Da Vinci Code is absolutely true, which therefore means this is right and this is wrong, and it's thrown a curveball at them. They don't know what to. What we would say to them is, fine, okay, just relax a minute, but go and investigate what you have been told. Does it hold water? And usually, like, take for instance the whole package of things surrounding the Da Vinci Code. The Da Vinci Code is a novel. It's historically incorrect. Now, let me tell you a problem I have before I say anything else, right? I said, I work with these young people. So one of them was looking on a website, a skeptical website, and he sent me messages on Facebook chat. I'm very cool. Right? You're cool.
I am very cool.
Do you Twitter as well?
No.
No, you tweet.
No,
you tweet
I
on
don't
Twitter.
tweet or Twitter, but I am on Facebook. So he sent me a message. We were on Facebook chat talking about this, and I sort of replied to some of the things that he picked up from this website, and he said, "Yeah, but you would say that, wouldn't you, JT? Well, you can't win, can you?
No.
I can't win." So he goes and talks to some so-called expert skeptic, and has a problem. Comes to someone who is able to help him find some answers, and I would say that, wouldn't I? But you will have to believe me, folks. You have to believe me, folks. That it's very easily. You can look at secular books, which completely debunk the whole Da Vinci Code thesis, the whole everything. All right. And I can't remember what the question was that you were asking.
We were talking about that. What we're saying to these people is to go and check what's being said to them. In other words. And it's very interesting what you said there. People, in the end, actually choose who they're going to believe. And if they've got this expert, what you've got to learn to do is to put everything side by side and say, and say, what does that mean? And I think as Christians, I think our attitude is very important. And I hear the attitude you've got there, JT, which I think is so right. In other words, you're not saying, oh, you shouldn't listen to that, this is correct. What you're saying is, okay, but how about? What about? And it is, isn't it? It's that way of asking questions and getting them to think about what they've been told.
Well, that's right. And when I'm talking to someone in that way, all I'm trying to do is push aside the objections so that the gospel can have a free entry into their life and they can make the real decisions then. So I will sometimes say to someone, if it's a Da Vinci Code as an example, go to Smith's, buy the rough guide to the Da Vinci Code. Not written by Christians, just go away, read it. It's about £5 or £4 even. Come back and talk to me and you tell me if you believe any of the Da Vinci Code after that. And you've pushed that aside. And if they genuinely are searching, because people who are interested in the Da Vinci Code are interested in Jesus and a bit about the Bible and all this sort of thing. And of course, this isn't about the Da Vinci Code, it's a whole wide range of things. But in dealing with honest skeptics, people are genuinely searching, we have to give them enough respect and give their minds enough respect that they have enough purchase to get a handle, not just on what we say is the truth, but that the truth is rooted in fact, evidence, real life, real history.
And we should expect, in these days where Christianity, after all, is not acceptable to so many, we should expect more and more things that actually purport to be truth and reality that are there to destroy our faith. And in fact, we should expect that, and we should almost have that built-in skepticism. Say, okay, I'm going to look at this, or I'm going to get somebody that knows what they're talking about to see what is the problem with that.
Yeah, that's right. And we need to be prepared that just like it was in the first century, you had this competing mass of religion. Whether it was the official state religion, which was emperor worship and devotion to everything that was Roman, whether it was Judaism, which was like halfway to Christianity but not quite there, whether it was the worship of Mithras, which is what the Roman army, particularly in the eastern Mediterranean, it was strong, various pantheon of ancient gods comes up in the Bible, Artemis and whatever, Diana in Ephesus. There was this competing mix of things, and Christianity had to effectively compete with which is true. And there are the intellectual things, but there's also the community things as well, the fruit of the faith in Jesus, which are equally as strong and needed.
JT, as ever, really appreciate. We're going to be.
Is this the end of the program?
It's the end of the program. We're going to. You talk too much. We're going to be carrying on developing in this for people and getting as practical as we can with people in future times with you. But it is so important, isn't it, that people think, look, and discover what's been going on. JT, bless you. Thank you very much.
Good to be here, Doug.
Thank you all very much for joining us every week at this time for more exciting things where we take the truth and present them as simply as possible. Look forward to seeing you again. Bye for now.
Bye.